Welcome to RealGM Radio. Keith Smith is here. I'm Wes Goldberg. We're talking about teams with closing championship windows. Who has the most pressure to win a championship this season? Let's jump in. All right, welcome to RealGM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg. Thanks for listening and subscribing on your favorite podcast app and on our new YouTube channel. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Keith Smith is joining me today. Keith is a salary cap expert and a contributor to Spotrac. He's the co-host of the NBA Front Office Show, and he's here to help me rank the teams currently in their championship windows. And Keith, I thought we could do a draft of teams from windows that are the closest to closing to windows that are most open. So in other words, like the first pick in this draft might be the team you think has the closingest of the closing championship windows, the team with the most pressure maybe to win a championship this season, or they might not have a chance going forward. So we did a coin flip before we even started. You called heads. Heads was right. Just so you know, I have not won a coin flip in now like 2 months when I'm doing these things. So the streak is alive and well here. So congrats on winning the coin flip. You have the first pick. Go ahead. Let's jump in.
Yeah, so it's interesting when you think about this, right? I like the premise of the idea of like who's got pressure to win because their window's probably not going to be open super long. So that there's a couple ways I think through it. I think through obviously age is a major concern, but I also think about the cap situation, like how long is it tolerable to be in whatever situation they're in, or wherever it's at. And then I think about also what's around that is like, are they even really a title contender? Like, there's a lot of teams that are going to be good, but are they truly title contenders, or where are we at? So then I started to build out my list a little bit, and the team for me that I'm going to take off the board, number one overall, the Phoenix Suns. And the reason why is you have age-related concerns with Kevin Durant. Even a guy like Yusuf Nurkic is starting to get up there a little bit for, guys, a key part of the Suns rotation, really the only real viable starting center that they have on the roster. Devin Booker's not old by any means, but Bradley Beal is not old yet, but he's kind of like plays old, like because he's always hurt and those kind of things. And then wildly expensive. So I think we're really with the Suns. We're on like year 2 of what is probably at most a 3-year window with this experiment. Does KD want to see it through? Is KD a guy we've seen him at times say, maybe I want to go try somewhere else and do something different. And like I said, I don't know how long that ownership group and front office is going to be able to say, hey, let's stay, miles over the second apron with this. And that could be where this all, comes crumbling down almost as quickly as it all came together.
The Suns is a great call. And for the record and for our audience, the reason I thought of you for this episode is because you're so like locked into the contract stuff and the cap stuff and the second apron that does impact lifespans of teams and stuff like that. So I'm very excited to kind of get into the nitty gritty of that stuff with you. But also, like, part of this exercise is just determining who the real contenders for this season are. And maybe I'm overlooking Phoenix, but I don't even have them on my list. I have 8 teams on my list that I'm picking through here. Like, my big board is 8 teams. How many teams do you have, like, in sort of your contender tier?
I think I had 9.
So maybe that's the only one that's different.
It could be. I might have another one slid in there that might be different. But yeah, it's I have I'm sorry, I have 10.
Okay, so there's a mystery dark horse team out there.
Yep.
I think I have an idea of who it might be, but maybe I'm just being overly harsh on Phoenix. It's a great first pick because you're absolutely right. Like, not only is the salary cap an issue for Phoenix, not only is age an issue for Phoenix, but also the question of like the flight risk of their star players, not just Kevin Durant, but like at what, like, I don't mean to start the speculation on this because there's no reporting on it, but at some point Devin Booker's got to look around and just be like, what the hell's going on here? Yeah. And I think there's definitely some flight risk with all that stuff too. So yeah, it just does feel like the Suns have so much pressure, and it's tough to have that much pressure and clearly not be as good as some of the other teams on this list, which is really going to hurt them in terms of hitting this window the right way. But yeah, maybe I'm being too low on them because their ceiling certainly is contender status. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, I think with the Suns too, I don't I don't put too much weight into this, what the team thinks of as themselves, like if they fancy themselves contenders. But to me, if you're so far over the, never mind the tax and first apron, you're so far over the second apron you can't even see it anymore. You better be a contender, otherwise you're doing it all wrong. Like you have bungled this thing beyond comprehension. So that's kind of why I have them in there. Yeah, if we were just ranking like title favorites, they would not have been my top choice at all. They would have been further down the list. Of my 9-10 teams, they might have been 10th, or maybe 9th. But I think in terms of what they're trying to do over the next few years, this is where I feel like they're trying to contend, and I feel like it's a super short window.
So I've got two teams, and I think the Phoenix Suns would qualify in this if I included them. I've got two teams at the very top of my big board and like a separate tier to themselves. I call this the Indiana Jones teams, right? Like this is Indiana Jones running through, trying to catch like that sliding rock that comes down. He's got like the whip behind him and whatever. Like it is like just barely the hat makes it through. The window is that close. And I have got the Milwaukee Bucks as my number one pick, the second pick overall in our little draft here. I think they're under immense pressure to win a second championship under the Giannis sort of era right now. Brook Lopez is 36. Damian Lillard is 34. Chris Middleton is 33. Pat Connaughton is 31. Bobby Portis is 29. Giannis is going to be 30 in December, which feels weird to me. Yeah. It feels like he's been 26 forever. Middleton has a player option next year. Brook Lopez is going to be an unrestricted free agent. Dame has 2 more years left on his contract after this. Giannis has 3. So it's not so much risk of like Giannis walking away or anything. But we have seen sort of the declining returns since basically they won the championship in 2021. Like this, Middleton's just not as good. Brook Lopez isn't as good. This team is aging. They made the huge swing at Damian Lillard for a reason. I still think that this team is a championship contender. I still think that there's a chance that they can come out of the East. I think Giannis is that good, and we just can't disqualify them as long as Giannis is on that roster. I think Damian Lillard is due for another big season. I think the two-man game is going to be better. I think Dame has a bounce-back year. I don't know. I'm kind of higher on the Bucks than I feel like a lot of people are. That said, I'm not that high on their future because it feels like this. I don't really have, like, how many years left do you think this team has, considering some of the decisions that the players and they have to make this summer? Is it 1? Is it 2? Maybe at the most 2? It feels very precarious right now for Milwaukee.
I'm completely with you on everything you said. They're definitely a title contender. I think we have been. Boston was so good last year. Philly and New York are both feel like there's just so much shiny and new with both teams that it's like everybody's fired up about the Cavs and the Magic and the Pacers because they're coming up, and it's like, oh yeah, the Bucks, like they're still around too, I guess, right? And my thing is like, if you could just fast forward to round 1 of the playoffs, and if their guys are all there, they've got a chance at winning the whole thing. Like now, my question is, are they going to be there? What kind of shape are they going to be in? If they are there, are guys going to be hurt? And then with everything you said, I mean, you've got Dame and Giannis. We're at $100+ million on the salary cap for those two guys. Trust me, I get it, because people are like, oh, you don't understand the cap's going up. Trust me, I understand the cap's going up. But if there's anything I understand, it's that. But that's still half of the cap, for the next or more for the next few years at least. And at that point, that becomes very hard to fill out the remainder of the roster. And that's where you're either going to have to need Chris Middleton to deliver, or as awful as this sounds, and I mean, I try not to be soulless numbers guy all the time, but like you may need to trade him and turn him into something else that is younger, that can extend this window. This is something I remember going through with the Pierce, KG, Ray Allen Celtics. Was Danny Ainge kept making little moves because he's like, I'm trying to turn a 3-year window into 5, 6, 7, 8 years if I can. And they ended up really turning into about a 6-year window of contention with those guys when honestly, they had no business being contenders after the first couple of seasons. But they were still right there battling to make it. And my thing is like, that's where you're at with the Bucks, and how you do that. Part of that is move on from a guy and you turn him into something else. You turn him into maybe a couple guys who are, they don't have to be kids, but you're turn them into, all right, we've got these mid-career veterans, 2 or 3 guys that are coming in that can really help lift Giannis and Dame and maybe going to be more available. But yeah, I'm with you. Like there's not a long shelf life for this Milwaukee team just because of the age of so many of their players and the contract situation and how expensive the team is overall.
Yeah, just to put a pin in maybe having to make a move here in general, but like you just look at Giannis, again, going to be 30 in December, has played 3 total playoff games over the last 2 years because of injuries, right? He hasn't been able to finish playoff series the last 2 years because of injuries. And even like sort of quietly hasn't been super available in the regular season. It hasn't been like a huge issue, but like 73 games last year, that's fine. But 63 the year before that, 67, 61, 63, a couple of those are impacted by COVID. But like we're not at the same place of Giannis early in his career, just always playing like 80 games a year, like penciling it in, which used to be the case. Like and some of this is just maintenance, right? I get it. And it's not like a huge deal, but there is a little bit of wear and tear and some decline. And the fact that he hasn't been able to finish the playoffs the last 2 years is a really big deal for Milwaukee. So there's definitely some concern there. I don't know. I still think Giannis could be one of the best players in the league on any given night, right? He could be the number 1 player in the league any given night. The guy is still that good. I think it's fair to wonder like how much longer will he be at this level of dominant. I think he's going to be a top 10 player for a very long time, but like at this level, like we've seen people kind of hit a cliff and then just sort of fall off. Who knows, at the risk of speculation, like who knows when that's going to happen. But it does feel like if they were going to make a move, maybe it would be, I don't know, something would have to happen to like basically Giannis for them to like fully pull the plug on this season and make like a Damian Lillard or even like a Chris Middleton trade even by the deadline, right? Like, but if they don't get it done this year, then yeah, you got to start looking at how you're going to reset this thing and get younger. But the weird thing about that, Keith, and you know this, but like you can't get that much younger.
No.
Right? Because you still want
to with Giannis and Dame.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even if you trade Dame, even if it's just Giannis, like how you can't even like, because we just saw this, like, yeah, Giannis is locked up under contract for a very long time, but we just saw this in Portland with Damian Lillard where it said, he's like, yeah, I know I just signed an extension, but like, it's just me and a bunch of teenagers. Like, what do you expect me to do with this group? Like, and then he forces his way out of there. You don't want Giannis risking that. Even if you have him under contract, you don't want that to turn into that kind of situation internally. So, you want to try to get younger, but you don't want to like surround him with 23-year-olds either. So it could be that's a tough balance. Like, hey, let's trade Chris Middleton at 34 years old at that point for a young 2-way wing who's almost as good as Chris Middleton. Like, what other team is going to make that deal? Like, that's not an easy trade to make.
No, and that's when you end up trading draft picks. And then that's how these teams end up in these awful spots when it really is. Now we're in the post Giannis years, and it's like, oh yeah, and we don't have 3 of our draft picks because we were chasing, the another title. Now there's something we said, if you believe you're close enough, and I firmly believe in this. I do think I'm going to say something that sounds maybe blasphemous given our topic here today, but I think people worry too much about windows sometimes, especially when a team hasn't won one. Like, go win a title. Like, it's forever. Like, you will always have that championship. So when you're close, go get it. Go do what you need to do to get it. Like, go win that championship. But that said, they did win one. So let's not mortgage everything to try to go get another one. And that's where it gets a little tough. And I'll say this with Giannis. I said this to a friend of mine the other day, and at first he was like, "Oh, that's insane." And then he came back to me like an hour later, and he's like, actually, the more I thought about it, I think that's kind of spot on. I think there's a greater likelihood Giannis wins a finals MVP before he ever wins another regular season MVP. Only because to win a finals MVP, that means he needs to be technically pretty great for a finals, but probably pretty great for an entire playoff run. I think he's got that in him probably a couple more times. I don't know that he's going to play the required games, 65 games, to win another NBA MVP. I think we're going to see a lot of the guys that we think of as the best players in the league. Some of them by default are just they're going to disappear out of those award conversations because they're just not eligible. Not only we're going to get down to a point where it's like, well, the 7th best player in the league won MVP because the first 6 guys weren't actually available enough to win it. Like, I don't think we'll ever get there, but I do think a guy like Giannis, to your point, we're still going to be talking to him as a top 5, top 10 player in the league, but that doesn't mean that's where he'll be in MVP voting because I just don't know that he plays enough.
It's a great point. You're up.
All right. I'm going to take one that maybe, I don't know if it'll surprise you, but I think it might surprise some people. I'm going to take the 76ers
Okay.
off the board. And the reason I'm taking the Sixers off the board is I love what they did with Paul George this summer. I love the way they filled out their depth around that signing. I thought Daryl Morey did a fantastic job really building a roster out when often we see it go the Phoenix way, where it is you add a big salary guy, you keep two other big salary guys, and then you're filling out with minimums. I thought he did a really nice job, really creating what should be a really good team. Here's my issue. How many years do we believe Joel Embiid and Paul George are going to be healthy April, May, and June? That's my worry with this whole thing. It feels like we are, even though we haven't even started the clock, it feels like we're already on the clock. Like with this. I love Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey is in any other situation, I think we would talk about him as a full-blown superstar in the league because I think those are the kind of numbers he'd be putting up. I think he is deferring in a good way to veteran guys, whether that be Joel Embiid or James Harden when he was there. I think Maxey has done a really good job of kind of, hey, I'm still the young kid here. I got to play my role. But Tyrese Maxey alone is not enough to make up for. We get into the first round and Embiid's limping around and Paul George is out. It's not going to matter. Maybe you can pull off a first round win, but that's going to be it. And that's where now, if they can get a couple years where George and Embiid are healthy at the right time of the year when we get into the playoffs, absolutely this team could win a championship. But I don't even think we get to the end of Paul George's contract thinking of these guys as full-blown title contenders. Never mind the end of Embiid's new contract with the extra year tacked on as title contenders without some other moves having been made. And that's the thing. It just feels all very, very tenuous with this team.
Tenuous is a generous word, isn't it? Yeah. Like based on what the Sixers have done. But technically, right, this is a 4-year window, right? You've got Paul George and Joel Embiid locked up for essentially the next 4 years. You've created for yourself a 4-year window. Paul George is 34, Joel Embiid is 30. It's fair to wonder, okay, is it really a 4-year window or is it like a year or two shorter than that? Are we talking about a 2-year window, a 3-year window? If I had to put like an over-under, I'd probably put it at like 2.5. And I might go under on that window, which is fine. Like you open up a window. You've got like a lot of teams wish they were on this list, right? That's what we're talking about. This is a great situation for Philly to be in. They have finally, and the biggest thing that kind of sticks out to me with the Sixers lately is move past the drama, right? Like you're so far past some of the processing drama that is just sort of surrounded Joel Embiid throughout his 8-year NBA career, with whether it's like the different general managers, Sam Hinkie, and everything that went along with that, mostly outside noise, but whatever. And then the other GM, I'm forgetting his name, but with the burner tweets,
Brian Colangelo.
Colangelo, thank you. And then Ben Simmons, James Harden, etc. It's like, okay, Joel Embiid just signs the extension, which I thought was a no-brainer move for the 76ers. You just got to do it. You get Paul George, again, expensive, something the Clippers weren't willing to pay, but you got to open up your window when you got Joel Embiid. No-brainer move to me again. Tyrese Maxey, you got him. Like, there you go. You've got your trio. You're free of drama. You got the coach that you wanted, and Nick Nurse. Like, it's game time, baby, in Philadelphia. Yep. Like, it's do or die, but it just feels like, man, wouldn't you have wished for them to kind of get to this point like a couple of years ago as opposed to right now? It just felt like they were always close but never got there. But again, you got to tip your hat. They finally did get there, and this is sort of what everything has been leading to. I think this team, if they wanted to, could win a ton of regular season games. I don't know that they're going to care about that. I think they should probably prioritize, hey, Joel Embiid, maybe just hit 65 games because we all know that you want to be all NBA and all, you care about that, but let's not get you to 75. Paul George, ditto. Let's just get, maybe even he at this stage might be like, I'll play 55. I don't care. But if it's up to him, right? Obviously, one of these guys can get hurt for 2 months and then it's not in their hands anymore. But yeah, you got to catch lightning in the bottle in the playoffs because I don't know about you, Keith, but like I still think I think Joel Embiid is so freaking good. I really do think the playoff shortcomings are mostly bad luck. I'm not trying to make excuses, but like he's so good. Like I have a hard time believing that he can't just be dominant in a playoff series. I know we haven't really seen it, but like one playoff series where his face isn't broken or is dealing with a bum knee or something, it just feels like it's there for him.
I'm with you. I think there's been a couple things. One, it's whether he's been banged up going into the playoffs, or I think what gets like sometimes like he's just run into times when one, his team's not the better team. So I don't know if they're really expected to win. And sometimes he's been great. And then other times he's run into, maybe it's 50-50 or a toss up, but like the Boston stuff, right? Losing to Boston repeatedly. I just think Boston generally has had better teams. And the other part of that is too, Boston is just uniquely equipped to defend him every time they come there. And they have a plan that went from Stevens to Udoka to Mazzulla of they trust it, which is, hey, let him go get 40 in the first 3 quarters. And then he's not going to be ready to go. Fourth quarter, he's going to be already tired out. But the problem is Philly's like, we can't not let him get 40 in the first 3 quarters. Otherwise the fourth quarter won't matter because we'll be down 20. So like you're playing chicken or the egg constantly of, maybe we can find that magic. And I'm with you too, where it felt like, just let all this other stuff go. Like I'm over the process stuff like that. Right. That's a lifetime ago in NBA terms. That's a decade ago now. Embiid's been in the league for 10 years. I know it sounds crazy to me to even say that, but I think it's because he missed so much time early in his career that it really only feels like it's like year 7 for him. But it's like, he's now just like Giannis. He's on the other side of 30 now. Like we're at a point where like all that other stuff, like that's all old news now. Move forward. You have a great team. And this is a good example of we're close. Let's go for it. And I trust with Daryl Morey too. I think he is maybe it's because he learned at the feet of Danny Ainge, but there's no sentiment here. If Paul George is not Paul George in 2 years, guess what's going to happen? We're going to try to trade him. And we're going to move them and we're going to figure it out. And that's going to be how we try to keep this window open around Embiid and Maxey as long as we can.
I would hope that those conversations are at least happening too, in terms of like, let's go for it. Joel Embiid, you already have your regular season MVP.
Yep.
Like let's go for this thing. Let's make sure that we're maintaining you. Adding Andre Drummond this offseason, I thought was a sneaky good move for them. It's like
big time.
Serviceable center behind him. And you could, if we give Embiid a night off here, Paul George the night off there, you can kind of rotate them as long as when you have stars on. Obviously, Maxey could just play, 120 games, no problem, but whatever it's going to be.
Well, that's a great thing with Maxey, right, too. He's so scalable where it's like, hey, tonight Paul George isn't here. Tonight Embiid's not here. We need you to get 30. He can go out and do it. And they added a ton of wings. This team is loaded with all kinds of wing guys that can play in place of Paul George. And I said it over and over again going into the summer. They needed to spend on a quality backup center, even if it is 75, 80% of the time. Maybe even you hope it would be 90 to 100% of the time. That's a luxury. And what you would love to do is say, man, we overpaid Andre Drummond to play 8 minutes a night in the playoffs. Great. Then you did it. Yeah. But you'd rather have that than we're masquerading with Caleb Martin at the 5 out here because we have no other option because we didn't get a backup for Embiid. Like that's where, hey, let's go. Let's be really, really smart about that, with this stuff. Cause I think that's, just the way you kind of have to be. I'll say this too. I know you've said it a couple times, like about the whole just go for it thing in Embiid, like you already won your MVP. He did have comments recently where he said some version of like, I don't care about individual awards anymore. I want a title. And that's exactly what I want to hear. I don't, if the best thing for me is to play 60 games and I'm not in range to win any awards, so be it. I've already done that. But if that gets me there, my one worry is I feel like we said that for like 4 or 5 years running with the Clippers. And then they tried it. And then they got to the playoffs and both Kawhi and Paul George were healthy. And then like a day later, they weren't. Right. Again. So it's like, it feels like we haven't quite cracked the code on this. We know it's important not to run guys into the ground all season long, but like super load management isn't necessarily the great thing either because that has always worked out. So, but yeah, Philly's going to be a fun watch.
It's a great point. They added Gershon Yabusele. Just had to include that. True. Loved him in the Olympics. And they might have another move to make too, by the way. Like they could probably use a real power forward. It sounds like they're going to be starting Caleb Martin there. It's not the best utilization of Caleb Martin. He's a little undersized. It's not a big deal if you got Joel Embiid next to you. But again, if Embiid's not always next to you, it could be a problem. Kenyon Martin Jr. is on a big contract. They've got
that's the one, right? That's their trade piece. That's why they paid him what they paid him was, I'm Mr. Numbers and I don't like to be this guy, but when you drastically overpay a guy to turn him into a walking trade exception, I start to feel a lot less bad because when he's getting $8 million and he was probably only going to get 2 or 3 on the open market, I don't feel too bad saying, yeah, they paid you to make you a trade chip, because you know
Part of
what?
the job.
He knows it too, right?
Right,
Like
exactly.
he knew what he was signing up for.
Exactly. It was part of the job. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And of course, you get the rest of the great stuff that Game Time has to offer, like all-in pricing. Toggling this feature on shows the total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And with seat views, get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. With their lowest price guarantee, if you find a cheaper ticket, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And with Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. I have the next pick, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm going Minnesota here.
Okay.
I actually have them in my Indiana Jones tier. That's the other team along with Milwaukee. I was surprised I had them here, but when I was like looking at this roster, looking at their payroll situation, I'm like, is this it for Minnesota? Because look, they're at risk of being a second tax team a second year tax team, a second apron tax team for 2 years in a row next season. They're already a second tax team this season. And it's been well publicized. They can't afford that. We weren't even sure they were going to be able to afford it this year, and it sounds like they're going to just bite the bullet and do it. 2 years in a row, probably not. The whole ownership thing, they'll figure that part out. But Gobert has and Naz Reid both have player options. I think I have that right. Gobert at like 46.6, Naz Reid at 15 million. And that could relieve like the tax concerns a little bit, but then you're losing a really important player to your championship caliber roster. So this isn't to say that the window would close all the way. Like, I'm not trying to say that, but in terms of like this core, the Anthony Edwards, Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, Naz Reid team, Mike Conley team. Mike Conley obviously also on the other side of 35 or whatever, however old he is now. This might be it for this team. Like, Anthony Edwards is good enough to that window can be pried back open, but I think they would still be like a move away. Even if they were to move off of one of these pieces, it would still take maybe a year or two to get back to where they were last year, which was a Western Conference Finals. So they could reopen the window, but I think this window for this team, this core, might be done after this season.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because I've been saying this for a while. Barring Rudy Gobert taking some ridiculously undervalued contract just to extend years out or whatever it may be, one of him, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Naz Reid is not going to be there next year.
At least,
like one of those three is going to be gone. It's whether it's they trade Towns, Gobert leaves in free agency, or they trade him, or Naz Reid just ups and leaves in free agency because free agent class is terrible and Minnesota can't pay him, and he just wants to be in a bigger role, maybe a starter, whatever. Who knows? But one of those three guys is not going to be there. They're on my list, but I had them way lower. But the reason why is I just believe that much in Anthony Edwards that I think what happens when you have a guy like Anthony Edwards, I'm with you. This core group, yeah, we're on short years. Maybe this year, maybe you can squeeze one more year out of it, even if one or two smaller moves are made. But I think Edwards alone kind of blows your window out, where it becomes you got to be very smart. You have to be really cautious how you do this. But I think you can reset this team around him very quickly, where it can be, okay, maybe we take a little step back now, right, but it's to take a big step up forward in a year later. Like, that could be where this kind of all comes together. But you made a great point there. It's not tolerable for them to be this expensive for very long. It is still one of the most shocking things to me that we're talking about them ahead of Boston and Milwaukee this year in terms of payroll. Like, they're running down the Suns almost. And that's not going to be a year over year thing. It's ultimately going to cost them a player or two, because that's going to be how it goes. But I don't know. I had him a little lower on my list because of Anthony Edwards.
And we're saying the same thing here. Like, Anthony Edwards, you probably have to take maybe a gap year. You probably have to make some additions or something. And then that window is wide open again. And maybe that's the next version of this thing. I love that the Timberwolves went for it, by the way, with
Sure.
Gobert and all these things. Like, we could dispute the details of the trade and whether or not they overpaid for him, but like, it's already, you could argue, worked. They made the Western Conference Finals last year, right? Like,
agreed. Yep.
So I think they're on the list of contenders for a reason. I think they're gonna be right up there again this year. Anthony Edwards is ridiculous. He's awesome. He's coming off of the Olympic run. He's got a gold medal now. I can't wait to watch him. But man, wouldn't it be cool if he like won it like this with this team? And it's almost like, and you know, I'm always gonna relate everything back to the Miami Heat if I can. It's like 2006 Dwayne Wade doing it with Shaq.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple years in between where, okay, like it's not viable anymore. We got to kind of reset it. And then boom, there's another window there with, you know, I don't know that Anthony Edwards is going to play with LeBron, but who knows? Maybe, who knows? I'm not going to rule it out.
Yeah.
All right. You're up next.
All right. I'm going to go with Denver.
Okay. Interesting.
It feels too high, but also it feels like right. Jokic is incredible. Like, Jokic alone will keep their window open for at least a couple more years. But the challenge is, we've already seen, I don't knock them for losing Bruce Brown. They did not have the ability to pay Bruce Brown, because this is where I caution everybody. We can all talk about great value contracts and how amazing of a signing they were, and holy cow, they got this guy for $6 million or whatever. That's all good until he plays really great, and you then can't pay him because you have no bird rights and there's no way to offer him what he's worth and anything like that. So that's where, that's just kind of one of my challenges. Like, to go back to the Bucks, everybody loves, myself included, that they got Gary Trent Jr. on a minimum. Well, if Gary Trent Jr. is anywhere near as good as we all think, he's probably not on a minimum next year, especially if Milwaukee plays well. And that became a one-year thing.
Right. That's
kind of the Bruce Brown situation. Where I do knock him is they let Kentavious Caldwell-Pope go. I don't want to hear any of the second apron and stuff baloney. You could have signed him. You didn't need to use the taxpayer MLE on Dario Saric. You didn't need to give Westbrook a second year and a player option. Like, these were just short-sighted decisions on those two guys specifically. And if you had them both on 1-year minimum deals at just over $2 million, that feels a lot better than having them combined $8 million this year. Maybe you can go an extra $3 or $4 million for Caldwell Pope and keep him. I'm not sure where Jamal Murray's
you were calling out earlier, I think.
What's that?
Denver. This is the team you were calling out earlier in terms of when you have the window, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're in it. Like, why are you letting guys walk away that are important players to your team, right? Like you've had the best starting five in the NBA for a few years running now, and you let one of those guys walk away. I like Christian Brown. I don't know if Christian Brown's ready to be a starter, and they clearly don't either, because there's already news coming out of Nuggets, like training camp and media days all happening right now for them. But there's already news of, hey, Peyton Watson might be looked at in the starting group, and maybe they're hoping Julian Strawther can step forward. Well, all right, wait a minute. I thought we were all sold on Christian Brown's the guy. That's why we let Caldwell Pope go. I just, maybe they know something about Kentavious Caldwell Pope that none of the rest of us know. I'll always give the team the benefit of the doubt on that. But I'm worried about Jamal Murray. The last two times we've seen him, high pressure, high level basketball, he's been terrible. He was terrible in the playoffs. He was really bad in the Olympics, almost invisible in the Olympics. Aaron Gordon needs a new contract. Michael Porter Jr. is good, but what happens when Michael Porter Jr. needs his next contract? And they're like, we don't really want to give you a max deal again. Where are we going with that? That's where this just feels like, again, we have a clock on this. And this one really feels like you better start figuring it out around Jokic, because I continue to say, I don't think Nikola Jokic is ever going to walk in and be like, I don't want to play in Denver anymore. Trade me away. But I could see Nikola Jokic being like, won a bunch of MVPs. I won a title. I'm just going to go home and race horses.
Yep.
I'm not going to play until I'm 40 years old. Why do I want to do this and have this aggravation?
Yeah, for a guy who clearly doesn't really even want to be in America sometimes. It just can't wait to go back home, which, not faulting him. That's the biggest thing. And I had the Nuggets and one other team where the team I had the hardest time kind of figuring out where I had them. I ended up having the Nuggets a little bit lower here. Well, actually, maybe not that much lower. Maybe like a spot or two lower. But I don't know how much longer Jokic is going to play. He's 29 years old right now. If he walked away from the game at 31, would anybody be shocked?
Yep.
I don't think so. Like, he'll probably see out the rest of this contract and then at that point. But yeah, I don't see Jokic playing until he's 37 in the NBA. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I love watching him play, but I'm with you. And then in terms of the KCP stuff, right? It's so easy to sort of look at the cap, like see an Excel spreadsheet of all this stuff and be like, well, they had to let somebody walk at some point. Like if it wasn't KCP, then their risk, maybe losing Aaron Gordon, not being able to afford him, because then that would take them into the second tax potentially. And Michael Porter Jr. is worth X amount of dollars and all this stuff. And then immediately you remind yourself that no, if they wanted to pay these guys, they could. They just don't want to. Right. Yep. And then as soon as that comes up, you're like, you know what? Yeah, it's going to be really expensive. But guess what? You have an all-time player, Nikola Jokic. Make it expensive. Figure it out later. It's worth it. It's worth all the money that you're paying for. But they didn't go that way.
I'll also say this, too.
Yeah.
Your family owns multiple sports franchises and you own Walmart. Like, don't tell me you don't have the money.
And the other franchises stink.
Yeah.
You have one good one.
Yeah. Yeah, like what? Like I don't want to hear that it's anything. And yet they operate like they are this tough luck small market team, but like the way the Thunder did in the early 2000s, where it's like, well, we just can't keep James Harden. It's just too expensive for us. And I certainly don't want to get into relitigating all that, but it's like, no, I don't want to hear that out of OKC, or out of Denver rather. Like you could have afforded to keep him, and I know people like, well, didn't they offer him the same deal Orlando did? Yeah, so offer him more. Like, what are we doing? And again, if it really is a concern, why did you give Sarge and Westbrook the deals you gave them? You didn't need it. Who else was going to give those guys those contracts? Nobody. Right. Everybody else in the league would have been like, you want to do it for a minimum? Great, come on in. And what else were they going to do? Say no? They weren't going to sit until mid-October unsigned and then be like, all right, we'll jump on now. Like they would have taken 1 year minimum deals and figured it out. Like both guys have kind of been there. So yeah, I won't go too far down that rabbit hole.
And at risk of going even further down, now that you can have private equity invest into your franchise, there's ways to make up this money. Yes, you're parting with a percentage of ownership, but like if you're worried about like initial costs, then like go get BlackRock investors to do something and just call it, help them pay for it. That said, I think the Nuggets front office would tell you, listen, we don't even need KCP. We got all these guys ready to go. We outscored opponents by 14.5 points per 100 possessions last year. The core four minus KCP, right? And the year before that, we were even better. And then I would push back like, well, it was only 400 possessions, according to Cleaning the Glass. So it's a really small sample size, yet they believe, evidently, that their four, Jokic, Murray, Porter, and Gordon, is good enough that they don't need KCP. And by the way, they might absolutely be right, and they might look like geniuses for this, like you already kind of said. Maybe they know something that we don't. But they need one of those guys to pop, the guys that you already talked about, and they're going to need to re-sign Aaron Gordon. And maybe there's a Porter trade down the road where you could break up that salary or something like that. But I do think that as long as this team has Jokic and Jamal Murray, who are both locked up through 2028, they're going to be a contender, which is why they're on this list. But this is right about probably where they need to be. I had them, like I said, a little bit lower just because I think some other teams are a little bit more desperate because I still believe in the Denver core. But and financially, they're actually in an okay spot if they want to be. It's just whether or not they want to be or not. So my next pick is going to be actually, where do I want to go with this? All right, I'm going to go Boston here. Here's my thing with the Celtics. They're a year away from losing at least one key piece. We know that. They're going to have a $500 million payroll next season if they don't kind of make some moves here. Al Horford's 38, Drew Holiday's 34, Derek White is 30. This is an awesome team. I think they are probably the favorites to win the championship and repeat this year. But I do wonder if this is it's similar to what I was talking about with the Wolves, where this is sort of the closing of a core. And then you kind of have to do a couple of things over here to reopen that window around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Tatum and Brown, they're going to be owed a combined $100 to $131 million, just those two, over the next 4 years, which is already like 50% of the total payroll before you start flirting with that first apron. So, look, I couldn't go so far as to put them as like one of my Indiana Jones teams or much higher on this list because they still have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and that infrastructure. I just think this team is always going to be awesome, and they're in the East. They'll always have a chance to make it to the finals. But I do think we're kind of looking at this might be the last stretch for this specific group, and there might have to be like a year of like retooling in between like the next chance they get.
Yeah, I'm not even going to argue because they would not have been my next pick, but they're like only one down. So like they're right there. And you may even reject my next pick. So we'll see. Maybe I would have picked them next, but it is I'm with you. This is not set up, despite the fact that they went out and re-signed and extended everybody. Even though you did that, this is not set up. I just wrote about this over on Spotrac, where the Celtics are letting tomorrow's problems be tomorrow's problems. And this is a great example. If they're going for it, they know we're awesome right now. Let's try to win another one. Maybe we could squeeze one more year out of it. Mm-hmm. Then eventually Al Horford's going to retire. Eventually all of the crushing weight of the second apron, both financially and just roster building restrictions, that's all going to come down on top of them. And you have the sale kind of hanging over the team too. We don't know who's going to buy them. Everybody's kind of hoping like maybe this Jeff Bezos thing is real and he'll just buy them and be like, I'm going to be the next Steve Ballmer. And I don't care because you know what, whatever, $500 million. Cool. I found that in my couch cushions, it doesn't matter to me. Right. Like, let's go. But who knows? Right. A lot of those guys come in and they're like, but we need to shed because I want this to be a profitable venture and all those kind of things. So we're going to find out where all that comes. But yeah, I mean, tenuous kind of seems like the buzzword here for some of these teams. This is not as tenuous as a couple of the others, but it's like pseudo tenuous where it's like, see me in 2 years. Right. And we'll talk about it. Cause that's where we're headed with this. But for now, that's why I keep telling Celtics fans, man, enjoy the heck out of last season, the celebration of last season, starting this year, enjoy the heck out of this year. Because I don't know where it's going to be after this season. We'll see. I don't think that means Tatum or Brown, but I think somebody else is not going to be around, right? And I'm kind of taking Al Horford out of that mix because he's now at the point in his career where he's, going to make $10 million or less. Mm-hmm. He's probably more year to year on, do I want to keep playing? Do I not want to play? Where's that at? But I'm talking about one of the big salary guys. So Porzingis, Holiday, White, one of those guys is probably not going to be around. And again, I think a couple of them, especially Holiday, kind of contract he got with the idea of, hey, I may not make it to the end of this deal in Boston. And it kind of is what it is, and we'll see how that goes. So it's, but I'm with you. I'm not going to argue that one.
Yeah, maybe this year, maybe next year. Al Horford's a free agent after this year. Kristaps Porzingis, his last year on his current contract is next year, not this upcoming season. So they might be able to hold it together. You're so right. Like the ownership, it's like, how much are they willing to pay the new owners, whoever it ends up being? If it's Bezos, then probably no problems. If it's somebody else, maybe potentially there is. But that's why I think there's a lot of pressure on the Celtics right now to just go for it, right? Like there is, like the window is wide open. You are clearly the favorite in the Eastern Conference. We haven't had a repeat champion since 2018. They're probably the best bet since then to repeat. I think they're probably the best bet since the Warriors did it. So I think there's a lot of pressure on them to get it right, to do it, because you don't really know what the future is going to hold. I went ahead and picked Boston. You have the next pick. Today's episode of RealGM Radio is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. You want to play Prize Picks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, MMA champion Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, so you can reject these, and I've got a backup pick, or you can tell me I can't do what I'm going to do because I'm going to blatantly cheat here. There's 2 teams that I think very much see themselves as contenders. I see them as exactly the same level of team. And I personally don't think either one's a contender, but I think that's where they are. That's Golden State and the Lakers.
Yeah. All right.
And I just kind of smashed them together. You can tell me I can't pick them both as this combo deal. That's fine. I won't. I'll move on.
You know
But for
what?
me,
I make the rules here, and I'm green lighting it. So
all right,
I
perfect.
love it. And you know what? It never, from what I understand in sports media, it doesn't ever hurt to talk about the Warriors and Lakers.
Oh,
So let's do
100%.
it.
Sure, yeah. And they certainly both love when we basically say they're the same. Right? Like people love that. But
Right.
the reality is like aging superstar driven teams
Yep.
that if everything falls right, sure, they could win the title. But everything has to fall right. And that's the problem. They are wildly expensive, mostly driven because of their top end talent. I'm not even going to complain about what those guys are paid because they're all paid what is fair. But what's happened is that's made building the rest of the roster tough. You saw with the Lakers, LeBron came out and was like, hey, I'll take less. I'll even take a lot less. And they still couldn't get it done. Now, Lakers fans, which because Trevor is my co-host over on Front Office Show, he's a Lakers guy. We get a lot of them. They're like, well, that's because Rob Pelinka stinks at his job and he's terrible. Maybe, but maybe guys are like, yeah, team's just not good enough. Like I don't want to go there, for whatever reason that may be. I mean, as we're ready here to tip off the season, less than a month away, they lost Spencer Dinwiddie and Taurean Prince and replaced them with Dalton Connect and Bronny James. That's it. That is the sum total of roster changes for the Lakers outside of a couple two-way guys. That's not good enough. Like they weren't good enough last year. They're not going to be good enough this year. I mean, Dalton Connect would have to be the far and away rookie of the year player for them to take that kind of leap. And then with the Warriors, Curry's great, still playing really, really well, but no longer is so great that he can just kind of carry everything all on his own. I liked the Warriors offseason. I thought letting Klay Thompson and Chris Paul go, shedding the money, turning in effect those guys into Buddy Hield, Kyle Anderson, DeAnthony Melton was really good work. I think they're going to be better as far as they're better equipped if people miss time. I think they're a deeper team than they were in prior years. They still don't really have anything resembling a center. So that means probably going to be Draymond Green. Jonathan Kuminga is obviously not happy because he wants to be paid and they haven't paid him yet. And it just feels like we're just kind of trying to squeeze what we can out of the last years of Steph and let's get it done. And this is all ready to crumble and it's going to happen sooner rather than later. So these two teams seem very similar to me. And that's why I kind of just packed them in there. And I threw them kind of in the middle because it's like, I don't even really think they're contenders. Right. But everybody else seems to, so I might as well put them on the list.
I'm totally here for it. I think the Lakers are on the bubble of this list, like the fringe of this list. They were in the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago. They were not well coached last year. I don't know if JJ Redick is going to be a good coach. Nobody really knows unless you ask JJ Redick, and then he's absolutely certain. But he could be. And if he is, that's like you're talking about things that had to break right. That's maybe the most major thing that has to break right is that JJ Redick can sort of tap into something here and get the Lakers to play. And then obviously you get another healthy season of LeBron and Anthony Davis. They were healthy last year. The role players play up to snuff a little bit better than they did last year. And then who knows? Maybe they're a run away from making another Western Conference Finals. And once you're in the conference finals, you're a contender. I'm a little bit lower on the Warriors, but I do think they're in a 3-year window right now based on Steph's extension. He basically just gave him 3 years. He said, you know what? Let's just figure it out. They're clearly a move away. It feels like they have to trade Kuminga at some point to try to go all in on somebody. Reportedly, we're not willing to do that for Larry Markkinen. Weren't willing to do it for Paul George. Whatever, we could, we don't have to debate that. But would they be willing to do it for somebody else down the line? Who knows? But it does feel like that's a team that understands that they're also a move away. I'm with you. I like their offseason because it gave them some of that flexibility, whether it was with the cap or just the roster. They've got like big, chunky, tradable contracts. Like there's a move to be had for the Golden State Warriors if it sort of reveals itself, if it materializes. So I have no problem with either of these teams really being on the list, although I'm with you. They're probably on the fringe of the list if they're on the list at all. But, I think they're definitely worth talking about because we could look up and be like, whoa, LeBron just had another vintage playoff run. Oh my God, what just happened? Inspired by his Olympic gold medal run or whatever it was. Boom. I don't know. I was watching the Olympics. I'm like, are we sure LeBron's still not the best player in the NBA?
Yep.
It was crazy. So I'm not going to rule anything out for either of those guys. So that was your combo cheating pick, which, hats off. You did a good job there, kind of circumventing the rules. I'm going to go with the Mavericks here. This is really just sort of an age thing for me. Luka's always going to give them a chance, but Kyrie's 32. Klay is 34. This is a team that if they don't win it in the Luka, Kyrie Irving window here, which is probably 2 years until we start seeing some drop off here with Kyrie. I don't really know. But if they don't win it here in these next couple of years, I don't know where they're going to find the next Luka Doncic co-star. They're really stripped of assets right now in terms of draft picks. This comes down to me, like they need Derek Lively to really pop, like in a major way, be like at an all-star level and probably like all defensive level. Because I look up and down this roster and I'm like, they don't really have another young guy on the roster capable of making that sort of leap, right? Don't tell Jaden Hardy I said that, but like they don't have that next guy. Like all the concerns we had about the Mavericks when Jalen Brunson walked away and before they made the Kyrie deal and we're like, oh my God, how are they going to find Luka's next co-star? They sort of still exist with this roster, right? They're just sort of band-aided over by Kyrie and Clay coming and look, credit to the front office. I think they've done just home run after home run over the last couple of years here, but they've really gone all in on this window. So credit to them. I think they've done a good job, but once this window is closed, I think they might have a hard time opening it up unless Derek Lively is just that dude.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're similar-ish to Minnesota in my mind, where it is Luka is that good. Like Luka is going to have you there. So as long as you can reset around him in a reasonable manner, you're probably going to be in contention almost every year, in and out. And he's just young enough that like that's going to last for a while. So that's where I had them one notch, lower than here, just because I was like, all right, the team I'll pick next. I just have a couple more concerns about. And the reality is too, I think it's important that we note here, we're getting to the end of this whole thing. So these teams are good. Like they're going to be good for a while.
Right.
So it's not like we're saying like, oh, these guys are bad. It's actually, this is a draft where it's better to be drafted lower, right? Because it means we think you're going to be good longer. But yeah, everything you said about the Mavs, I'm there. It's going to be a little bit harder, but they just got to be smart about the way they do it. And they may need to be really aggressive about resetting that roster around. It might be, this is the, there's people shocked to surprise the Celtics guy is also a Patriots guy when he was doing things that the best anybody ever did it. Bill Belichick's whole thing was, I want to be a year too early on a player, moving them on, then a year too late. And if that means they trade Kyrie Irving and Kyrie goes out and turns in an all-NBA season, but you got one younger guy or two guys who really fit and are going to be better for you for the next 5-6 years, fine. Then that is what it is. You don't want to have it be, oh, Kyrie's contract ran out and he just walked away. Or we have Kyrie and now it's just gone, right? Because now he's in his mid-30s and he doesn't have it left anymore as a small guard or, whatever it may be. So, yeah, I think as long as they're really smart about the way they do it, their window's going to be open for a while.
Agreed. Next pick.
All right, the New York Knicks. This is where I'm going to go. I did clear one. I mean, spoiler, everybody's like, where's the Thunder been? Well, yes, their window's wide open forever, it feels like. But with the Knicks, I had the Knicks just ahead of Dallas. I would have picked them just ahead of Dallas. Like the only reason why is they're completely devoid of draft picks moving forward. Like they really have, they've moved all their picks. So that's tough. I think there is just so much overlapping talent on this roster that it feels like there's going to have to be more moves that come. I love Mitchell Robinson for the 50 games he plays every year. We're already hearing he's not going to be ready till December, which I think if I'm the Knicks, that's probably more like January then, because I'm going to be cautious with him because it's, if we're going where we want to go, we need him. Who knows what it's going to be with Julius Randle. I did not like the whole, I think the expectation is he'll be ready for the start of the season. My mindset was he's definitely ready for this. So why is there even doubt that he might be, right?
Right.
That was a little concerning to me. I love Brunson. I think he's great. I really like Mikal Bridges. I think OG Anunoby will prove the contract will be fine because of where the cap is going. But I think in a vacuum, that's a little bit of an overpay. But I understand why they did it. They gave up so much to get him. It feels like this team has a chance to be really good, but it's not going to be this team that's going to be the one that breaks through. It's going to be whatever they do with 2 or 3 of these guys to turn them into one other guy. That's going to be the team that actually breaks through if the Knicks break through.
I'm with you 100%. This team, like, I'm not even totally sold that the window is open right now. Like, I'm not sure that they deserve. It's weird. The Knicks are sort of a contender, but I don't really see it happening for them. This is a team that, like, they're waking up in the morning. They were feeling really good. They had a good night last night, right? Like, they got a cup of coffee brewing and whatever, but, like, the window shades aren't open yet, right? That's the Knicks to me. I feel like their year is next year. It feels like they still have a couple of things to figure out. They're going to figure out if Julius Randle can play small ball 5 and if he has a spot on this roster, or if they need to potentially move him, or see what happens there. The Mitchell Robinson thing, already set to miss at least a couple months. I'm with you. I'm not expecting to see him until next year. OG Anunoby isn't like the healthiest guy. It feels like they're always going to need one of OG or Mitchell Robinson on the court to be a functional defense, because if you don't have one of them, then all of a sudden you've got all these springs breaking free in the dam, and it's just going to be hard to fill them. So I think their year might be next year, especially if the Celtics take that step back that we were talking about earlier, and the East gets a little bit more open than what it is now. We talked about Milwaukee, Philadelphia, some of these other teams that could be that were drafted higher for a reason. I think the Knicks window is open, but I'm with you 100%. It's probably not this team that wins a championship if they do win the championship. It's a team that looks a lot like this, but it's probably not exactly this one.
Yep.
All right, that gives me the Thunder for the next pick. No surprise here. Nothing bad to say. The window's open now. They hit a home run at the first at-bat in the first inning of this offseason by signing Isaiah Hartenstein, making the Alex Caruso trade. You know, they basically they came off of a great playoff run, a very encouraging playoff run. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander getting MVP ballot placements and all these things. And they said, okay, we kind of did the proof of concept. We know we're this good. We know there's like two things that we need to address to really take ourselves over the top. And they said, well, Josh Giddey got played off the floor in the playoffs. We need somebody who can defend, not get attacked on defense, and somebody who can make open threes. Boom, Alex Caruso. Thank you very much, Chicago Bulls. We need a center who can take us from the bottom 5 in rebounding rate to the top, or near the top of the list in rebounding rate. Enter Isaiah Hartenstein, who almost single-handedly kept the Knicks in the top of rebounding rate last year. So they're the kid that got home, who just had to do his homework, and he did his homework first so that he had the rest of the night to just play with his friends and play video games or whatever. That's what the Thunder did. They knocked it out within like the moratorium part. So this team's awesome. They're young. They still need to sign Chet and Jalen Williams to what will probably be max contracts off of these rookie scale contracts. Shai's going to be eligible for a super max, I think, around the same time next year.
Yeah, about a year after, I think it is.
So as long as nothing unexpected happens on any of those fronts, they're going to have all those guys back. That's the core 3. They'll be dominant for years. And even if something does happen, they still have so much draft picks and so many other things, so many other bites at the apple, that they might actually be able to afford losing one of those guys and still sort of reload. This team is just loaded with draft picks. They have 1 billion draft picks over the next billion years. Nothing bad to say about the Thunder.
Yeah, it's funny because the single biggest question I see from people, I feel like it's almost like they're trying to talk themselves into why they might not be as good as we all think. It's like, well, like, isn't their secret weapon how great Chet Holmgren is offensively at the 5? Like, and if you make him play the 4 because you signed Hartenstein, how's that gonna work? And my whole thing is, I'm like, those two guys are not going to play together for 35 minutes a night.
Right.
Like, that's going to be probably an overlap of maybe 10 minutes a night together, if that. So guess what? Holmgren's going to play the 5 plenty. I'm not even sold Hartenstein starts. Like, so many people seem to think he's locked in. And I'm like, I think the Thunder are like, dude, we paid you what we paid you to get you. That doesn't mean, yes, I get it. For years and years and years in the NBA, contracts sometimes dictated who started. Not in this case. They paid him that to get him. And I think he's going to be like, cool, I'll come off the bench. I'm still going to play, so I don't really care. Like, and you know what? That $30 million still cashes. Like, it doesn't matter to me if I'm, starting or coming off the bench. But what they have now is this incredible versatility that they didn't have last year. They didn't have a way to match the biggest teams last year. And as much as that makes them a very good, really great mismatch on the offensive end, it did cause them issues defensively at times and did cause them issues on the glass. Well, now they have that. And like you said, there's no real holes now that you can be like, all right, bend everything away from Josh Giddey. Just keep an eye on him on those corner crash cuts. And as long as you account for that, we're not going to worry about him. I said this, the Thunder beat the Celtics in a regular season game because Josh Giddey made felt like 6 or 7 3-pointers, probably more like 4. But It felt like he was hitting all his threes. And what Boston did was they tipped their cap and said, cool, we play you next time and we play you in the playoffs and the finals. Do it 4 times in 7 games. And then we'll have been proven wrong. And that was the approach everybody started taking. When games really mattered, especially in the playoffs, it was, just don't guard the guy. Like, and we're going to gum everything else up. We're going to make it a mess for SGA on drives and all that stuff. I think they have the ability, if they need to kind of do whatever they need. If they're like, man, we need to replace Lou Dort because we just need a bigger guy, like a guy who can do this. Or we need one more ball handler who's a really competent shooter. Well, they'll go get it. They've got the matching salaries. They've got the draft picks.
Yep.
I think we have gone a little too far with their draft picks. Oh my God, they're going to run every draft from here to the end of infinity. Well, they've used some of them now. They've moved quite a few of them. They still have don't get me wrong, they still have a great treasure chest of picks. Picks are not all that. Like if you looked at their picks, the Clippers, as they started to step back, that one looks a little bit better, but some of them are like, these teams really going to be bad. Like, I don't know. So I don't know that, this is not the Celtics holding the Nets picks.
Right.
It happened, a decade ago. This is all right, these are pretty good picks and we'll see what they become. But man, when your team's built around a superstar who's just entering the edges of his prime years, let's go. And then Holmgren's great. Jalen Williams is awesome. The other Jalen Williams is good too. This team's just, they've got shooting, they've got defense, they've kind of got everything you need. And I'll say their windows today through, I'm going to give it 5 more years.
Yeah.
Now, it can go wrong. A lot of stuff could get sideways. Maybe they don't win at the level they want. And one of the players is like, man, I want more. I want to be the guy. Right. I want to be the one. Maybe that is the way it goes. But as it looks today, there's no indications of that. Let's go. This team's going to be terrific.
100% agree. Just to go back to the Alex Caruso thing there, too. When Giddey got played off the floor, they had to go to Isaiah Joe, who's a great three-point shooter. I'm still not sure he's ever missed a three-pointer because I haven't seen it. And so every time I watch, I'm like, oh, he's a 48% shooter, or whatever, 40% shooter. I'm like, he makes all the ones I watch when I'm watching on TV.
Feels like it, yeah.
That's all he does, right? He's not a rebounder. He's not a defender. That's really it. So you replace him with Caruso. You got still that physicality. The one thing that Giddey did bring to the table, which I thought kind of got, which is the reason why I think Dagnall always went to him, is because he was their best rebounder, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
And so you need some of that physical presence. Caruso brings that. He's not an awesome rebounder, but he's physical. He'll get in the dirt and he'll do all those things. And then you're exactly right. You pay Hartenstein $30 million to match up with the Nuggets or to match up with the Timberwolves. You basically lost your playoff series against Dallas because you couldn't rebound the ball. So you just cleaned up all these issues. Everything that the Celtics did last summer in terms of being okay, we need this thing, and this thing. We don't really need this guy, and this guy anymore. Let's swap them out, kind of refresh around Tatum and Brown and go for it. And then boom, they won a championship. The Thunder saw that and said, okay, we need this, and this. We don't need this, and this anymore. Boom, let's refresh it. Let's get the guys we need. Let's fix all the holes. And now this is a team with no weaknesses. And I agree 100% with your point. Chet might be the starting 5 anyway. It doesn't matter. Hartenstein doesn't have, and even if they play the first 5 or 6 minutes of every game, it's not going to dramatically change the way that the Thunder play. So they are the last pick, which in this weird draft with upside down rules is the best place to be. Keith, thanks so much for jumping on here, man. I really appreciate it. You can check out his work over at Spotrac. You can check out the NBA Front Office show that he co-hosts. It's a must listen. He's a must follow on Twitter. Keith, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.